Students may access Arts Edge on the internet at this address for 2 weeks after the program with questions for the artists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you could join us here at the Hylton High. I'm Billy Taylor. The jazz composition we just played is called Geneva's Move. On behalf of the Kennedy Center and the Prince William County Public Schools, I'd like to welcome you to a demonstration and performance. In this program, we'll be playing and discussing a style of jazz called cool jazz. Now, I'd like to welcome all the students in classrooms all over the country and the students right here in the auditorium of the Hylton High School in Prince William County, Virginia. I'm glad you could join us, and I'd like to introduce you to the members of my trio. This is Chip Jackson on bass. And this is Steve Johns on drums. On trumpet and flugelhorn, our very special guest, Jimmy Owens. How you doing, Jimmy?
Oh, I'm fine this morning.
Good. Now, you know, what we just played was one of the characteristic songs from the cool era of jazz. And in the 1940s, many adventurous musicians wanted to express themselves in ways that were more subtle than the way they could express themselves in a style called bebop. The style they created was called cool jazz because it was a direct reaction to the hot, excitable, aggressive bebop style. Now, they expressed themselves using a different kind of sensitivity. Now, Jimmy the kind of sensitivity that this kind of music called for required some special attention to the brass instruments.
Well, one of the things that was very important about it was the fact that instrumentalists played very, very smooth in this style. And to play smooth means that you play in a style called legato. And it takes a lot of air, takes a lot of breath control to do that. And you don't have a lot of space to take breath. So that's one of the main things about this style.
So you have to hold notes a long time and really just string them together. How do you do that? Show me.
Well,
Now that's called Boplicity. And it's a tune that was very popular and one of the best tunes to demonstrate the kind of music we're trying to play. Now, the harmonies, though the harmonies that were being used were similar to the harmonies played in earlier styles of jazz like bebop, they were played with more rhythmic subtlety like this. Check these harmonies out. Outside of a few mistakes there, it sounded as though the harmonies were kind of clustered like that. And they were, because many of the things that were played, the clusters were and you could hear it better if I did it that way, perhaps. At any rate, because the music was played so quietly, the drummer frequently used brushes like this. Now, here's a tune on which he's going to play brushes, and this is a tune that was featured on an album called The Birth of the Cool. And the group that recorded it first was Miles Davis, Jerry Mulligan, and many other jazz musicians known these days primarily as bebop players. They wanted to play their own compositions in a more relaxed style, so although they had their own groups, they frequently came together. They got together on many occasions, and they played a more restrained style of jazz. They developed the cool style of playing and applied the same principle to their own groups. Now, we're going to play the tune that Jimmy was playing the melody to a moment ago, Boplicity, and let's see how that sounds with this quartet. Thank you. That was called Boplicity. Now, here's a clip from a vintage educational film on jazz. It features several well-known musicians who actually were playing in those days the cool style of jazz. Now, it features Lee Konitz and Warren Marsh, two of those musicians, improvising on an original composition called Subconscious Lee. Now, I want you to listen to the way these two musicians, both of these musicians play saxophone, and you'll hear them having a conversation between the tenor saxophone on the left, I guess, when you look at the screen, and the alto saxophone on the right. The alto is the smaller of the two. So check out Lee Konitz, Warren Marsh, improvising on Subconscious Lee. That was Subconscious Lee. Now, many cool jazz compositions were written by composers like the gentleman playing the saxophone there, Lee Konitz. Jerry Mulligan and Miles Davis also were people who composed music in this style. And we want to show you how that sounds with this group. Here are two compositions that share the same harmonic background. That means that they have the kind of the same chords as the support for these melodies. Now, one is called Ladybird. It's by a man named Tad Dameron, a wonderful pianist, composer, and arranger. The other is by the great Miles Davis, trumpeter, composer, arranger. He calls his composition Half Nelson, and this is the way they sound together. Thank you very much. Ladybird and Half Nelson played together. You know, since many of the players played in both the bebop and cool styles, some of the music that they liked to play reflected both cool and hot. So you had cool on one side and hot on the other side, and they kind of varied between the two. And one musician who was very famous for doing this was a very great player. He played the baritone saxophone, the largest of the, one of the largest of the saxophones, and he was a great composer as well as a great arranger. His name was Jerry Mulligan, and we'd like to play a piece that he was famous for playing. He wrote it for a friend of his who had a radio show out on the West Coast named Jimmy Owens, and he calls it A Line for Lyons. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was Line for Lyons. We'd like to invite the students in our audience to call in their questions at 1-800-578 1396. That's 1-800-578-1396. Now, before we take any questions, let's speak with our guest, Jimmy Owens. Jimmy is not only a wonderful trumpet player who plays the flugelhorn and who writes music and composes and travels all over the world. So, Jimmy, when I was thinking about cool jazz, I was remembering how it changed my playing. I mean, where I was on some occasions playing kind of a rambunctious style and playing fast and loud, excuse me, I began to play cooler. I began to play longer lines and softer and use a different kind of touch. Now, how did that affect you as a trumpet player?
Well, the musicians who developed the cool style affected me in that those lines, those melody lines that they created were smooth and legato, as we said earlier. And playing both of these different instruments allows me to express that feeling. For example, they sound different, and it makes me think different. Like trumpet.
Now, how does the trumpet? What would you do on the trumpet to get that sound going?
It's a bright sound, like this. You know that song, right?
Would you do something else on the now? How does this differ from the trumpet? It has something different here, I think.
Well, the flugelhorn has been around for about 125 years, and it's larger than the trumpet. You can see the bell is larger, and it has a warmer sound. So it takes more air, and it requires you to think differently. And the sound being warmer makes you feel different. For example.
How did you know it was my birthday?
I guarantee you it's someone's birthday out there today.
Listen, there is a lovely ballad that was written by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart, and in this period that we're talking about, the cool period, this was one of the tunes that everybody liked to play. It was called My Funny Valentine. Do you do that?
My Funny Valentine. Do you know that, guys? Well, man, if you know it, I know it. Then we can all play it together.
Okay. Jimmy Owens and Rogers and Hart's My Funny Valentine. Beautiful, Jimmy. Now, we have a phone call from Medford, New Jersey. Is the caller there?
Yes, he is.
Okay. What's your question?
I was just wondering, I'm just learning how to improvise, and when you improvise, do you have a favorite scale to use?
A favorite what?
A favorite scale?
A favorite scale? No. As a matter of fact, for me, I like to play melodies. And, of course, you make up melodies from scales, but I use a variety of scales that help me make up different kinds of melodies. It might be a diatonic scale, or it might be a whole tone scale. It could be anything. But the idea is to say what you have to say musically. How do you improvise, Jim?
Sometimes, instead of using a scale, just in your practicing, maybe you should use a few notes from the scale and just use those notes. It makes the mind think much better. For example, can I just show them something?
Sure.
We take 3 notes. Hey, you're a musician. Give me 3 notes to play. Caller?
Call off 3 notes.
Hi.
Yeah, what notes would you like me to play?
To improvise on.
B flat, G, and C sharp.
B flat, G, and C sharp. And I could just play for a long time just using those 3 notes.
Of course, yeah. Another question from the audience. Here you are, right there.
I'm Aaron Meisel from Saunders Middle School. And Mr. Owens, which musicians have influenced you the most?
Well, of the musicians that have influenced me the most, I would say the trumpeter Miles Davis, for his way of being able to play very smooth, romantic melodies and being able to express himself without using a lot of notes, just a few notes. So Miles Davis was my chief influence when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. Thank you.
Okay, another question from the audience?
All right, my name is John Hidoba, and I'm from Woodbridge Senior High School. The question is for Mr. Owens. Where do you perform, and do you have any albums recorded recently?
Well, I perform all over the world. In America, in Europe, in South America, in Africa. And the records that most recent, there's an album on the Blue Note label called Swing Time. And that's with a very great drummer by the name of Pete LaRocca Sims. So that's the most recent album. Thank you.
We have a phone call from Bayonne, New Jersey.
Yes. Are there any chord differences between bebop and cool jazz?
Yeah, in bebop, one plays with a lot more technical facility and a lot more notes and with a lot more vitality. Things like that are part of the bebop language. Now, in cool, you would take, if you were going to play Dizzy Gillespie's tune that I just alluded to, you could play it in a cool style and it would be totally different. Now, Dizzy always played it with a lot more vitality. So he would do much more with the notes and just kind of improvise around it. So the styles are different in that one is soft and sort of thoughtful, and the other is just kind of rambunctious. We have a phone call from Paterson, New Jersey.
Hi, yes, this is Samuel Bethea. I'm asking a question for Jimmy Owens. I just want to know what type of music do you really play? Like classic, jazz? What kind of music do you like?
Well, I like all kinds of music, and I listen to all types of music. I mean, from classical music to rap. I enjoy listening and performing in the jazz tradition, and that tradition is very large. I mean, jazz is a very small word, J-A-Z-Z, that represents a lot of music that sounds different and makes you feel different. And that's the reason why I listen to jazz, because I can choose different types of jazz that makes me feel different. It makes me feel good, sometimes makes me feel bad.
Well, there are many different styles, as Jimmy says. You can have a Latin style of jazz, a very bluesy style of jazz, a cool jazz, bebop, many other kinds of swing is something that young people are doing now. They're listening to the big bands again. So there are a variety of styles to choose from, as Jimmy says. We have a question from the audience here.
Hi, I'm Tarek Jones from Woodbridge Middle School. Is there any special significance to the titles of the pieces Ladybird and Half Nelson?
Those particular tunes, yes. One is talking about someone who's related to Charlie Parker, a lady that would be comparable to Charlie Parker, whose nickname was Yardbird. And so he had, so though everybody called him Bird, they would maybe call the young ladies that he dated or that were in his company Ladybird. In the case of Half Nelson, it's a rather funny story because there was a man named Nelson Boyd who was a very fine bass player, but he was not so tall. He was about this big. So Miles Davis, who was not so tall himself, always called Nelson Boyd Half Nelson.
I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
We have a call from Wilmington, Delaware.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, my call is for Chip. I'm not Chip. The guy that plays the horn.
The guy that plays the horn.
Yes. I'm sorry.
This is Jimmy Owens.
Jimmy Owens. Yes.
Jimmy Owens. I'm sitting home watching this show, and I got to tell you, you guys are great.
Thank you.
My question is for Mr. Owens. My name is Reginald Murphy, for one. I'm a great Brazilian jazz lover of Stan Getz. And a few seconds ago, you mentioned something about a chord, let your imagination drift. But Stan Getz did the same thing on One Note Samba. Do you recall that tune?
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could do it for me because you play that horn so well. I'm watching this right now.
I don't think we're going to be able to play that right now. We have a small amount of time in this television program, unfortunately, and we're almost at the end of that time now. But in that particular song, One Note Samba, what was special was how Stan Getz just dealt with that one note and how smooth he made that one note in the melody. You see, that's a wonderful melody because it just deals with a few notes. So you can relate that feeling of playing cool jazz to that melody. And Brazilian music has that kind of cool quality to it also.
One of the things that happened was that many Brazilians who had been accustomed to the samba began to listen to people like Stan Getz and Jerry Mulligan and people who played in a very cool style. They heard the records in Brazil and decided that they could use that on their music. So they developed the bossa nova. When the bossa nova came up here, we decided we would use their music on our music. And so it worked both ways. Bossa nova is now a very important aspect of playing jazz. We have another caller. As a matter of fact, we have someone standing right in front of us here, right in the hall. What's your name?
My name's Julianne Burney, and I'm from Woodbridge Middle School. And I have a question for Mr. Owens. What instrument do you prefer, the flugelhorn or trumpet?
Well, I must say that I use them both for different things. When I have to play fast and high and exciting, I wind up using the trumpet then. When I like to play soft and mellow, I usually use the flugelhorn. So I don't have a choice between the two. It is more difficult to perform on the trumpet. It takes more air, and you have to put the air through smaller pipes. So I find that sometimes when I want to relax more, I'll play more flugelhorn. Okay? Thank you.
We have a call from Virginia Beach.
Yes, my name's Anthony, and for Jimmy Owens, when you are writing music, do you prefer to use a melody first, or do you use chords, or how does that come together?
Well, sometimes I get an idea that is only a melody, and I'll compose the melody, and then I have to go back and put chords to it. Sometimes I have an idea that is a harmonic idea with chords, and I have to develop a melody that goes with those chords. And it's different every time. And what is wonderful is that you develop your creative skills so you can do it, compose any way that you feel at that moment.
Whatever inspires you.
Billy Taylor has composed songs with few notes, 3 notes. And those 3 notes he then had to make a harmony for. He did it that way. Then other songs that Billy has composed, he's composed the harmony first and then had to come up with a melody.
Which wasn't easy all the time.
Thank you.
We have someone at the microphone right now here in the Hylton High.
Yes, my name is John Driscoll. I'm from Woodbridge Senior High School.
Hi.
I was wondering which style of jazz each of you prefers to play or listen to.
Well, in my case, because I have grown up through a lot of different styles of jazz, I like to play them all. And I put them together in a style which is unique to the way I approach the piano. Excuse me. And it makes it possible for me to use aspects of older styles. I mean, I might use a boogie-woogie style. Or I might do something which is something in a Latin style, or now those are just accompanying things, and sometimes I even use some of the old ragtime styles. And that sort of sets a different kind of mood for me. So it depends on what I want to play and what I have to say musically as to what style I'll choose. Jimmy?
For me, the styles are not as important as delivering my emotion to the people who are listening to me in the audience. And that emotion, it's according to how I feel at that time. I could perform one particular song in many different styles. So that's part of being a professional musician, to be able to take your feelings and translate them to the audience in the way you feel at that moment. The style that is most important to me is a style of emotion, and I love the blues. The blues is a form of music, a form of jazz that we can perform in many different styles.
We have a phone call from Wilmington.
Hello, my name is George McManus, and the question I have to ask is, who do you think was the best between Miles Davis and Clifford Brown?
Well, you know, it's really not a contest. Each one had his own strengths, and you could like both equally simply because Miles Davis did one thing, Clifford Brown did something equally well in a totally different frame of reference. Jimmy?
Well, coming from Wilmington, Delaware, I would probably say that you're going to vote for Clifford Brown as being better than Miles Davis. I have to tell you that in jazz music, jazz is a music of personal expression and a music of a creative music that one gives of their creativity. So consequently, because one is giving of their creativity, there is really no way of saying someone is better than. We're always saying, I like what this particular musician does, and I like this, what this other musician does, and you make a choice between the two. You see, from the standpoint of how they make you feel. And it could be between 2 individual songs, between 2 individual musicians.
And everyone makes choices. You can say, without any fear of anyone contradicting you, well, I like Clifford better, or I like Miles Davis better. And you'd be absolutely right, because they both are equal in stature. But it's a matter, it is not a contest. And it's just a matter of personal expression. We have phone call. Is that Pottstown? That's Pottstown. Okay, Pottstown.
Hello, Mr. Owens.
Yes.
My name is Robert Edmonds, and I'm calling from Pottstown. I have a youth jazz group, about 4 trombone players, 1 tuba player. My son is a jazz drummer. and all these kids can read, and they're playing beyond their ability. They're playing like adults. I like to know what should I be teaching them about theory. I'm a trumpet player myself for about 18 years. The difference, I think, the middle school teacher is not teaching them Afro-American jazz. He's teaching them his theory of jazz. And they don't understand why I can twist certain notes and do certain things with notes and collaborate. Come back in and pop back in with different notes. They don't understand that.
All right.
Teach me how to do that.
Okay, well, the first thing I would say that you need to work with your students on is how to deliver their emotion through whatever they're playing. And whatever the vehicle is that they're performing, say, I would teach them the blues. And the blues in a few different progressions. Get them to understand the chords of the blues, the harmonic progression, and give them a few different sets of blues progressions. Get them to learn how to express themselves on the blues, because this will take them through any other kind of music that they have to perform.
Well, one of the things about using the blues is that the blues can be or it can be or it can be something like this. So there's all kinds of blues that one might want to play, and for your trumpet players and brass players, one of the things that they can do is what Jimmy was doing a little earlier, and just take a kind of I'm going to get him to do about 12 bars on the blues, just to show you what I mean. And in that 12 bars, he can do several things to make the trumpet sound quite differently. And that's just within 12 bars. So, with a little more, you can do many more things. We have someone standing at the mic. Very lovely lady. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Chantal Dickerson, and my question, I'm from Lake Ridge Middle, and my question is, how has the cool jazz style influenced the jazz compositions being composed today?
Well, cool jazz has given a different slant. What cool jazz brought to the music was the fact that you didn't have to be using a lot of notes all the time. You didn't have to be playing fast, and you didn't have to be a virtuoso, running all up and down the piano, or playing fast and high on the trumpet, or playing the drums in a very loud way with sticks and so forth, or playing the bass with a lot of notes. What you can do is to do something which is very simple, very restrained, and yet it gets across a very, very special kind of feeling, which is different from the more excitable, more rhythmic, more the louder kind of playing. It's the same as when you talk. There are occasions, if you're going to a ball game, you might want to yell for your team and say everything is great. But if you're talking to a friend who's sitting right next to you, you don't have to talk that loudly, and you can make a point by talking quietly and saying, this is what I have to say. So the same thing happens in music. A call from Norfolk, Virginia.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
I'm okay. I was wondering...
What's your name and where are you from?
My name is Jayon, and I'm calling from Norfolk.
Okay.
And I was wondering, first question is, how long have you been playing? And my second question is, I like John Coltrane a lot. I really listen to him a lot. And his style to me is kind of awkward. Could you kind of explain it for me?
His what?
His style to me is a little awkward.
Awkward in what respect?
To me, it sounds like sometimes like he will play with the music and like jump across it and play back with it, but all keeping it in retrospect.
What do you have to say about that, John?
John Coltrane was such a master that he took music from every different style and demonstrated his abilities to deal with that music. You listen to him play ballads, like with Johnny Hartman. You listen to him in the later periods of his life when he was playing more avant-garde music that was freer in form. You see, John Coltrane, being the master he was, he touched on all phases of jazz music and all phases of his expressionism. So that's why you may get the feeling that it's kind of many different things at once.
One of the things that I think John Coltrane's music shows is that at one point he was playing cool jazz. He was doing the same kind of thing that Stan Getz and other people were doing. But he decided that that wasn't the way he wanted to express himself. And so he began to do many, many other things. Well, I would really like to thank you out there in the audience in the hall here, and those of you who have taken the time and trouble to call us. And I'd certainly like to thank Jimmy Owens for being with us. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you,
All
Billy.
right.
Yes, it's wonderful being here.
And as long as you're applauding, give yourself a big hand. This is a wonderful audience. Let's put the camera on the audience there. Yeah, all right. Very, very, very bright young folks, and we're so glad that you came. Remember, you can ask, those of you who are tuned in, you can ask more questions via the internet for 2 weeks by using the address on your screen. Now, be sure to watch the next program on April 23rd at the same time, when members from the creative team of the hit Broadway musical Titanic will discuss the creation of that musical. Now, the cool style of jazz produced and inspired some of the most inventive and important music of the 20th century, and I hope that we have given you a little insight into it and helped you better understand how it was created. Now, I'd like to thank you for Chip Jackson on bass. Take a bow, Chip. Chip Jackson on bass. Steve Johns on drums. On trumpet and flugelhorn, Jimmy Owens. My name is Billy Taylor, and I hope to see all of you again real soon. We're going to close our program with another classic of the cool jazz area. It's called Bernie's Tune. Jimmy Owens. Steve Johns. Chip Jackson. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience.